Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have Andy van Rensburg from South Africa on the topic of relationship compatibility. I know you've been waiting for this one. So firstly, I want to say thank you, Andy, for giving a talk on this topic. I know that it's very important topic because you ran through it with me, and I was like, yo, this is important. So thank you for giving us a talk, and welcome. And I'm handing it over to you now.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate that. I'm excited about this. This is something that's quite dear to me. It's been a passion of mine, trying to work through all the relationship hills and valleys and rocky bits and smooth bits, and helping people to figure it out as I've tried to figure it out for myself as well. So yeah, it's really exciting for me, and thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. Welcome. It's a pleasure having you here.
Thank you. Thank you. So I guess, let's just kick right in. We can dive right in, and we'll talk about relationship compatibility. And there are 5 areas of compatibility that I'm going to talk about today. And those 5 areas, if they do have a pen and paper, they want to write this down, it might be helpful for people to do that. So if they quickly want to grab one, it would be good. And the 5 areas of compatibility are, of course, the 2 most important ones, which we'll start with, which are emotional compatibility and physical or sexual compatibility. And then there are 3 others that come off of that, and that is intellectual compatibility, spiritual compatibility, and experiential compatibility. And so we're going to run through each one, what that means, how to know whether you're compatible with your partner or not. Now, what is important to note before we start is that even if you are compatible with your partner on all 5 of these, it is not a guarantee that the relationship will work. However, that being said, if you're not compatible with your partner, it is a guarantee that the relationship will not work. Right. So what I'm saying is, let me rephrase that so people can hear it again and make sense of it. Right. If you are compatible, there is no guarantee that it will work. But if you're not compatible, it definitely will not work.
Right.
Right. Okay. Now we got that clear. Let's jump right in with, I think, the first one. I think before I go on to emotional compatibility, Tulsi, are there any questions you might want to ask that you think people would want to know at this stage? The answers to?
I think that is like the simplest way you put it. Like, you first have to go on a date and see if we can first get along.
Right. And
after that,
with social media,
you go in.
right. And with with online dating nowadays, it's not a date anymore. It's like an interview. You don't go on a date, you go for an interview. So hopefully people don't use this as an interview strategy, because that wouldn't be very good. But it's helpful to know, because they'll see where the compatibilities are. So all right, so let's jump into emotional compatibility and what that means. What's good to know as well is that the areas of compatibility also account for areas of intimacy that can be built in the relationship. So when people hear the word intimacy, everybody's mind jumps to physical or sexual intimacy. But bearing in mind that that's not the only form of intimacy that exists. You have got emotional intimacy, obviously the physical, you've got intellectual, spiritual, and experiential intimacy that you develop with your partner. So I'm going to include that in each section as well, so people understand how that intimacy gets developed. So first area of compatibility is emotional compatibility. Now, what that means is both partners are invested equally in the relationship in terms of romantic emotions for each other. And each person can feel that emotion is reciprocated. So if one person is emotionally closed off, that is an inequality in the relationship where the other person is investing more. And that is going to begin to create an incompatibility in the relationship. All right. Now, the emotional compatibility, and let me just put a little disclaimer in here that these areas of compatibility are about monogamous relationships. And some of them might fall out of the categories of polyamorous relationships, but there might be some overlap as well. So we're targeting or specifically looking at monogamous relationships here. Right, so getting back to emotional compatibility, there's an equal investment, and that opens up the door then for vulnerability. So once you feel safe enough with your partner that they're as invested as you are in the relationship emotionally, that allows you to be vulnerable because you feel safe. And if you have an increased security around your own vulnerability, you're more inclined to develop a better sexual compatibility. So this does feed into sexual compatibility. It is exclusive to the romantic relationship, right? Because I don't think your partner is going to be too happy if you have romantic feelings for somebody outside of the relationship. So this would be exclusive to the relationship. And it's about that equality and creating safety in the relationship, that there's an equal investment. I did make some notes here, so every now and then I'll just refer to that because I don't want to leave anything out. So I'm just going to quickly check that I have covered all of that. Do you have any questions around emotional compatibility at this point?
No, I mean, if I think about, we've got a lot of arranged marriages in our culture, and a lot of people are coming out now and saying that, we should have really explored the relationship further before we quickly committed. And I think that
Right.
emotional side, I think that in general, right, I don't know from what your patients and the people you work with are telling you, but men generally have it quite difficult to open up emotionally, right? I mean, I don't know,
Right.
what have you seen where the relationship is breaking down? The woman likes to talk a lot and likes to
Right. So
emotional, emotionally, and the man is doesn't release it, and there's this big gap. Yeah.
right. So there is that happens, and it does tend to be more gender specific to men, that men are more emotionally closed off, right? And I'm going to cover some of this in sexual compatibility because it is important in that. But the reason for that largely is because as young boys, a lot of men are taught not to display emotion, right? They're either weak or soft or big boys don't cry kind of comments, that type of thing. And so they don't feel supported emotionally. They feel that they have to be tough and strong and they have to hold in their emotions. And that doesn't allow them to be emotionally open and vulnerable in a relationship. And it is something that can be repaired. It's not irreversible. And it's something that the men need to recognize within themselves, that they want to then open themselves up, be more vulnerable in the relationship, to be able to invest in the relationship, because the fruit that bears for them is a massive reward. So if they can get themselves to that point where they're feeling more comfortable to open up emotionally, they're going to reap the benefits of that. And we're going to go into that when it comes to sexual compatibility, because I know that for a lot of men, sexual compatibility is important, whereas for women, emotional compatibility is very important. Yeah. And so these two are very strongly and closely linked.
Right. Okay. So I can't wait to hear further.
Right. So it is a generalization. There are always exceptions to the rule. So nothing I say here is a hard and fast rule that applies to every relationship. It is just statistically a sort of higher probability in most relationships. So that's just something to bear in mind. And some of these concepts might apply to the men in the relationship. Some might apply to the women in the relationship. So, don't take this as a hard and fast, but it is applicable to both sides. So talking about sexual compatibility, I would say that, what is important, particularly near the beginning of a relationship, is to be able to have an open discussion around sexuality in terms of what is the expected frequency that each partner can look forward to in the relationship. Because you might have one partner that's happy with once a month, and the other one's looking for 3-4 times a week, right? So that's something that does need to be negotiated. And I would say certainly earlier on in the relationship, because it's earlier on in the relationship where you have your emotions clouded by things like desire, perhaps, lustful feelings towards that person. It might look amazing in the beginning. So you've got this fantastic sexual connection in the beginning. And then once the relationship is stable and it's been going for a couple of months, now one party's happy to just have sex once a month, but the other one's looking for a more sustainable 3 times a week kind of scenario, and that can create conflict. So it is helpful to have this discussion early on, and that requires vulnerability, right? And now you know why it's so important to be emotionally connected, because if you're going to have the discussion, you want to be vulnerable about it. It is also important that in order to create sexual compatibility, that both partners feel safe and secure in the relationship, which comes again with that emotional investment. So if the person feels that there's an emotional investment, and go back to your topic, let's be well, perhaps politically incorrect and blame the men just for this example, that they're not opening up emotionally. She's not going to feel safe. And because she doesn't feel safe, because he's not committed to her emotionally, she's not going to feel as, well, she's not going to desire him as much. She's not going to find him as desirable because she doesn't feel safe with him. And that's when the sexual interaction can become duty bound as opposed to a real strong emotional connection. And so what's interesting here, and this is helpful for the guys as well, if we generalize, men and women approach sex for the same reason. They're looking for the same thing, but they have different vocabulary around it. So going back to the point I made earlier about men growing up being perhaps emotionally unsupported, having to be tough, having to swallow their feelings, not be able to be vulnerable, they don't have an emotional vocabulary. But what they do have is it's more acceptable for them to be, let's say, sexual in their comments, to make those kind of rude comments, rude jokes, have that kind of vocabulary is more acceptable because it's kind of expected in our society for men to have that vocabulary and that way of thinking. Whereas if you take women growing up as young children are not allowed to express sexual desire. Right? That is like, if you're a lady, ladies don't do that. You've got to behave decently in public. Don't talk like that. So this is not a vocabulary that is allowed when they're children, but they're allowed to be extremely emotional. So they can cry, they can, come to their dads if they're feeling emotionally unstable, or their moms, get that support, the emotional support. They're allowed to be as emotional as they like. And so their vocabulary is emotional vocabulary. And so they're approaching sex from an emotional vocabulary. Men are approaching sex from a purely physical vocabulary, but what they're both looking for is validation, connectedness, acceptance, and then, of course, the physical gratification. But that only fits a very small part of it. I mean, it certainly is important, but the reason why they want it is to feel connected, accepted, and validated. I'm good enough. I feel safe enough. I feel connected to you. And again, that brings us back to the emotional compatibility. So the two are very closely intertwined. The more emotionally compatible you are, and the more you can have emotional intimacy, the better your physical intimacy is going to be. Because you can have that connection. You can have those vulnerable discussions about what you like, what you don't like, what you would like to try, what you're not happy to try. But that can only happen if both parties feel safe and able to be vulnerable in the relationship. Right. So, and again, sexual compatibility and intimacy, that is exclusive to the relationship, to the monogamous relationship. It is not shared. And so it is really important that it is achieved, excuse me, in the relationship. Let me have some water quick.
No worries. A lot to think about there. Sure.
Right. So a lot to think about.
A lot to think about.
So how do you create physical intimacy? Because compatibility is one side, right? Do we work well together physically? But how do we create that intimacy? And so the intimacy comes with the emotional connection. So now we're having physical intimacy, but I feel connected to you, whether it's spiritually or emotionally. I feel like we're part of each other, we're accepting of each other, and we can be for want of an obvious term, we can be our complete naked selves and still feel okay.
Yeah, that is
right?
Well said.
Okay, so that's how you create that sexual intimacy versus compatibility. Right. Okay, makes sense.
Makes sense.
Do you have any questions? Sorry, I didn't let you answer that. Do you have any questions at this point?
Oh my God, so many. Okay. Okay. So now you're going back to the arranged marriages, and I think that a lot of not only arranged marriages, because just recently I spoken to a girl who said about their culture and how in the culture, and like you said, like I can't believe it, like in her culture it was acceptable to slap the girl on the bum. I was like, okay. Yo, that was like, and it's like, but we were grown up to accept that. And I was like, okay, we weren't raised in the Indian culture to accept such to such a level, but the sexual conversation when you're falling in love with a teenage boy as a teenager, yes, that discussion is missed completely. Like,
absolutely.
Like birds and
Absolutely. And you're
bees.
kind of just messing around in the dark because you don't even know what you like yet, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So this conversation I think in general now when you say it needs to be a conversation as open, trusting your teenagers, that you're just educating them because you don't want them to end up in the wrong relationships, like the generational traumas that everyone else had followed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it gets taught, it gets taught from parents down, right? So if we can reach young, mothers who are becoming, or young ladies who are going to become mothers,
Yeah.
young fathers, or young men who are going to become fathers, if they can take in this information, they can pass that on to their children, and they can open up their children's minds to the wonderful world of a relationship, and that it does not have to be it does not have to be a puzzle you don't have the instructions for.
Yeah.
Right? There's a toolkit, there's a map, a roadmap on navigating it, on figuring it out, and how to do that. And the most important side to come from first is to first get that emotional safety to feel that you're equally invested in discovering for each other what you like and what you don't like.
And there's the key word that you just said, they're equally invested. So you don't feel like you're in a push and pull all the time. And that's where it's like this power struggle going on. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And it just gets worse. You know, once that starts, it just gets worse. So it's helpful to go there.
Yeah, I'll probably get more questions into us.
Okay, great. So we can revisit this. If you want to revisit this, I'm going to go through the other areas right now.
Okay.
So let's go on to intellectual compatibility. So intellectual compatibility does not have to be exclusive to your relationship. All right. You can achieve that at work. You can achieve it with your friends. You can achieve it with your family, which is really just having common interests that you can have deep, meaningful discussions around, or stimulating discussions around. Right. So some people don't have to have it in their relationships. And I would say perhaps some people that have very intellectual type jobs actually just want to come home and not have to think too much. So they might be happy with, just talking about the weather, what's happened during the day, things that are a little more trivial and don't require deep thinking. However, that being said, if you can acquire intellectual compatibility in the relationship, it will enhance the relationship because it can lead to what we call intellectual intimacy. So intellectual intimacy is when you have a deep, meaningful discussion with your partner around something where you both get lost in the conversation and time passes. You've now had an intimate interaction, intellectual interaction. And so it's helpful if you've got similar interests, things you can talk about. And if you don't, how to overcome that is to try and be interested in something that your partner does and enjoys talking about, and you just want to learn about it. Doesn't mean that you have to take interest in it, but you just want to learn about it. And that gives them the opportunity to have a discussion with you, and you can ask questions. Hopefully they reciprocate, and they should reciprocate that and ask you about things that you enjoy, and you can explain to them, and you can have that intellectual compatibility with your partner. But it does not have to be exclusive to the relationship. It can be with other people. It is just very helpful if you have got it, because it adds another dimension to your compatibility. Right. Does that make sense?
That's straightforward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And it does tie into, and I'm going to add this in. So this does tie into spiritual compatibility. And I'm going to go into how that ties into spiritual compatibility. Okay. And so that's the next one that I'm going to step into.
Can I pause you there for a second?
Yes, please do.
I think that in the past, we never really explored spiritual compatibility. We never had a name even for it. And with the evolution of how relationships are formulating, and with how Gen Z is operating, I think that element is quite interesting, because I think we know a lot more than we knew at their age. So yeah, it's a great great thing to evaluate and see. So please go ahead.
Right, because so right now in today's times, you've got a lot more cross-cultural relationships happening, which carry with them different spiritual backgrounds and beliefs. And so this type of compatibility is something we have to consider. When we were kind of marrying into our own cultural groups, we were perhaps more isolated from other cultural groups. And so we were marrying into our own cultural groups. It was sort of understood that we had the same spiritual beliefs and backgrounds. And so it wasn't really a case of, are we spiritually compatible? It was a case of, well, we believe in the same thing. That's it. We don't have to worry about that. Now that we're more cosmopolitan, let's say, we're having cross-cultural relationships, it does become an area where compatibility is required. So it is not essential that it is there, but I would say that if the people involved have strong spiritual beliefs, it becomes essential. And so I'm going to use a hypothetical situation. If I'm, say, Christian and I date a girl who's Jewish and she wants to raise our kids in the Jewish faith and I want to raise the children in the Christian faith, we're going to have an incompatibility, right? If she's Orthodox and I'm devout, we're going to have an incompatibility because we might be able to have meaningful discussions from a Christian background or Jewish background, but we're going to start having trouble when we have children. What religion are they going to take on? And that becomes important to both parents. And so there we have a bit of a problem, and that might create conflict. So it is an important thing to discuss in the beginning. You can then take the other side of that, where somebody might just be spiritual. So let's say they believe in a higher power. They might believe in sort of ascended masters or angel guides. They might be more esoteric, and their partner has a similar belief, or might be sort of just someone who believes in love. It's like, well, I don't really believe in God, but I do believe in love. In that case, they're gonna still be compatible because religion is not that important to them. They might be spiritual, but religion is not that important to them. So they can have great conversations around spirituality, what it means to them, what they would like to achieve in their spiritual growth or journey if they're on one. And this is how spiritual compatibility leads to intellectual intimacy, because you can have very deep, meaningful discussions around your spirituality with your partner. Okay. And so it is something that needs to be spoken about in the beginning, because some people have very strong feelings about their religious and spiritual beliefs. And if that conflicts with their partner's beliefs, there's going to be conflict in the relationship. Now, if you want to create spiritual intimacy, that is where you have a spiritual experience with your partner, a very meaningful spiritual experience with your partner. And that could include just witnessing something in nature that is awe-inspiring, that truly makes you feel like you're in the presence of awe, and you share that with your partner, is a spiritual experience. You might decide to do a psychedelic journey, spiritual journey together, and have that experience together, which is something you share and creates intimacy in your relationship. You might go into an establishment, a religious establishment, and both be part of a spiritual experience there that you share, that creates that spiritual intimacy. And so that intimacy creates a much stronger bond in your relationship. And so even though it's not essential to the relationship, I think because of its nature, having it does contribute to the health of the relationship.
Wow.
Right. Any questions around that one, Tulsi?
No, I was actually thinking when you're going to bring up the spiritual experience, because
right.
This is like some couples that I hear, like I know a couple who's been together for over 25 years. So they met when they were teenagers, and
Yeah.
and they're still together, and they're so solid. And when you ask them, how do you know? Just like, how do you know? How did you know it's you and him, and it's just
yeah.
And when they went into some things, like they go on masterminds together, and they go on their separate journeys, but they go together, and it's almost like a spiritual experience, because now you open to I don't have a hold on you, but we have to grow individually, and you have your stuff and I have my stuff, and we meet at a spiritual place, and
yes.
some experience makes our bond stronger, that says we are meant to continue on this journey together.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, what's interesting in a relationship is, you're absolutely right. Some growth happens separately and some growth happens together. What's interesting in, I would say 90% of relationships, is that your partner is always going to reflect back to you the stuff that you need to heal in yourself. And you're going to reflect to them the things that they need to heal in them. And it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because you can become defensive and that can result in the relationship dissolving. or you can accept that as a challenge to grow in the relationship and work on that in yourself, and your partner does the same and grows in themselves, and you can support that journey in each other. And that healing journey that you create in the relationship is, yes, you're right, kind of spiritual in a way, and really does strengthen the bond of the relationship.
Yeah, wow. You raised something that, like, you mirror each other, like
Yes.
mirroring each other and what you have to heal in that argument, because it's not going to be smooth sailing. And there's something that a lot of people say, but women are always complaining. And I try to say, I wish I could give them the answer. Maybe here's some answer here. And it's almost like, no, it's not complaining. They want you to do better because they're seeing something in you that can do better. So they're not complaining.
Right.
They try to elevate you, but you see it as complaining.
So I'm going to get onto that just now.
Okay.
At the end of the discussion, we call that self-expansion.
Okay.
And there's a way that it can be approached. But I think what is important to understand at this juncture with that question that you asked, or that statement that you made, is that one of the fundamental differences between men and women is women like detail, right? And again, I'm generalizing, but most women love detail. Yeah. So if you listen to a group of women talking, they go into great detail about whatever they're describing. Most men just want the bullet points. So the way I like to put it is, men just want the headlines, women want the news, right?
That's a good way to see it.
Right. So understanding that difference, and it doesn't make either one right or wrong, but understanding that difference is really important, which is why it's important that women have female friends that they can talk to about things in detail, and that they understand that the men in their lives are probably only going to be able to entertain short spaces of detailed conversation unless they have a shared interest in it. And that comes back to the intellectual compatibility. So if they share an interest, men will be very happy. So guys can talk in detail about, let's say, cars for hours, or rugby for hours on end. But when it comes to buying food for the house or what to make for dinner, just tell me what it is you're making.
Wait.
I don't even know how it's made, or how you cook it, or what the ingredients are. Just tell me how you cook it, or what you're making, right? So it's an important difference to understand, because it's not that anybody's doing anything wrong. And so men get accused of not listening because they glaze over once the detail gets too much. And so they get accused of not listening, and they also get accused of not communicating because they don't give enough detail. So they'll also just give, how was your day? Oh no, the day was great. Well, what happened? Nothing much. I went there, I did this and I did that, right? Whereas a lady might say, well, I spoke to Flo from reception, and she's having a baby, and her husband's not very supportive, and the lady down at the canteen had an accident 2 weeks ago. She's not back from it, and she's going to go into great detail about her day and everything that happened.
Yeah.
Right. And so the guy's like, glazed over. Right. No more. Like too much information.
Too much information. That's true.
Right. So it's important to understand that difference, because neither one of them is right or wrong. It's just different ways of approaching.
Yeah.
And you could look at it as the kind of hunter-gatherer approach that, if men are hunters, they're very target-driven. They want to get to the point as quickly as possible. Women being gatherers are more looking for the detail, right? So their peripheral vision is bigger. They're looking for where they can find something that's going to be valuable to their family. And so looking around, looking for detail, taking in their environment. And so they're going to be detail-focused.
Wow.
In general.
That is well said, like explanation spot on.
Okay, good. All right. So the last one, which is experiential compatibility, this one feeds into the spiritual compatibility, right? So experiential compatibility means sharing activities that you do together. Now, again, it doesn't have to be, it's again something that can be shared outside of the relationship. It doesn't have to be exclusive to the relationship, but it is helpful if couples do things together that they both enjoy, because you're sharing experiences with each other, and that builds the bond, right? You can certainly go and play golf with your friends. You might go and have a cycle with other friends. But if you and your partner are doing something that you share an interest in, you're now creating an experience together. And sometimes that experience might just be a vacation that you take together. It might be something that you do together that creates that experiential compatibility. So it's helpful to find a partner that enjoys similar things to you, because then you can experience life together in those things outside of everyday routine life, right?
Yeah.
What creates experiential intimacy is an experience that is either awe-inspiring or might even be a little dangerous. So let's say you go whitewater rafting together, right? And now both of you are terrified, or it's an exciting experience, or it's a terrifying experience. That will create an intimacy in that experience because you shared something that evokes strong emotion in both of you. Now, a spiritual experience that you're having together that evokes awe or strong feelings is an experiential, intimate experience as well. That's why I say those two can be linked.
Okay, right.
All right.
Yeah.
So that's experiential compatibility. I sometimes just call it activities that you do together. But those activities create experiences, right? So if you're going on a morning ride together, maybe you both see a car accident, and it traumatizes the two of you. It's going to create actually an experiential intimacy, as bad as it was, because you shared that experience, those strong emotions with each other.
I see what you mean.
Right.
Right. That's why when people talk about online dating apps, because I still can't get my head around that, all this, interests. I'm like, yay.
Yes.
Now
Yeah.
it's like
So
making
that's
sense.
important.
Yeah.
It's important, because, there was, I won't say who it was that said it, but he said that couples who do things together stay together. So I don't think that's entirely true, but I do think that if you are doing stuff together that you are getting enjoyment from or an experience from together, it is very, very helpful in the relationship. And so you might not achieve compatibility in all 5 of these areas, but I think if you can, you've got gold, right? And there's a good chance of the relationship working out. And so, yeah, that's, I would say, something really to look at quite seriously.
Wow. Yeah.
All right.
Interesting.
Right. So that brings us to the end of the 5 areas, but now we've got some added interest, as they would say in the infomercials. But if you keep watching, we have something special for you now. Right. So these are just interest points that I'm going to bring up. So something else that comes up around compatibility. So we spoke about, you said before, how sometimes women come across as critical, but they're trying to encourage their partners to grow or to be better, or they see the potential in them.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is called self-expansion. And so that's a very interesting thing. When a couple have been together for some time and they've developed the trust and the relationship has become sort of, let's say, more routine, the thing that is going to create more glue in that relationship is if you can see yourself through your partner's eyes. And so it's not just admiration. It's not like your partner saying to you, you're so handsome, or you're so beautiful, or you've got such a wonderful body, or you're so intelligent. It's not complimenting or admiration. It's more about inspiring your partner to be the best version of themselves. So you're kind of seeing them in their work environment and you say, wow, like, you really inspire the people you work with. I see how they look up to you. I think you're capable of so much. And now I'm seeing myself through my partner's eyes, and they become more attractive to me.
Right.
Right.
So
My partner becomes more attractive to me. But the important thing is that it doesn't come across as critical. Yeah. It comes across as supportive, and it comes across as something that you want to grow your partner. You want to see them be the best version of themselves. Yeah. And again, reciprocity here is important because you actually want that back from your partner too, right? So as a woman, if your partner recognizes your strengths and he can see where you're good and supports you in that and encourages your growth, and you can see yourself through his eyes, you're going to find him more attractive too.
Yeah.
Right.
Makes sense.
So, I mean, it's not a recipe to stop people from straying, but it certainly helps. If you're finding your partner more attractive than anybody else around you, well, that's a good start. And so this is one way to do that. Not the only way, but it's certainly one way to do that, is to be able to get your partner to see themselves through your eyes and what you love about them, not just their appearance, but how you regard them as their place in this world. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any questions on that one?
No, not on that one. That one is like makes sense.
Okay.
Like it's like choose the way you speak to your partner. Like, yeah, you spend so much time together, you know.
Right. So bring it across as, so this is how not to bring it across, right? If you weren't so grumpy, you could probably achieve more in your day. Like, that's not a good way of bringing it across, right? Because that's a criticism. That's coming across as a criticism.
Yeah.
If you had to take that and go, when you're in a good mood, you really uplift the people around you, and I can see how much they admire you. Can you see how I've just switched that whole conversation around?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The way to
from critical to supportive.
Yeah. So it's most of the relationships is that the communication, but that is actually really like damaging a lot, because like and it's not the unsaid stuff, like it's like because you're quiet there. It's all the words in between the lines that people are making up because they're not clear about this in the beginning. Like to say, be clear what you want, what you don't want, and whether it's going to be compatible or not.
Right. And you've got a good point there. So a lot of people complain about a breakdown in communication in the relationship.
Yeah.
And very often it's not that there is no communication, it's that it's what is being communicated and how.
And that's what needs to be there for a second. Now remain there in your train of thought, okay? Because we're moving on to the part of the second recording here, okay? So 1 second, guys, 1 second.
Okay.
So guys, Andy's got like a bonus that he prepared for you guys today, and I can't wait to hear it, because even I don't know what he's got planned. So over to you, Andy.
Okay, thank you, Chelsea. And so we've covered the areas of compatibility, the 5 areas of compatibility, and how those can result in relationship intimacy as well. What I wanted to talk about now is something called neurochemical compatibility. So the neurochemicals in the brain and in the body that will cause people to become attracted to one another, or that are compatible with each other. And so there are 4 of them. There are 4 neurochemicals that interact with other people that will allow for compatibility. And those are dopamine, serotonin, testosterone, and estrogen. Okay? How those work, so the dopamine type person, now this is not to say that the person is low on serotonin if you're running high in dopamine. You get individuals that have really high dopamine levels. It doesn't mean that they have low serotonin. It just means that their dopamine runs very high. And those are the kind of people who are highly adventurous. They love novelty. They're spur of the moment kind of people, spontaneous. So those are the kind of people say, let's pack up, let's go down to Cape Town for the weekend and just, wing it as we get there. So
I think you kind of like paused there for a second. I think the internet is trying to catch up.
High in serotonin in future and are not as spontaneous as people who are high in dopamine. So if we look at those 2 categories, people who run high in serotonin and people who run high in dopamine, the compatibility there is that people who run high in dopamine will tend to be attracted to other individuals who are also high in dopamine, all right, for obvious reasons. Because if you're spontaneous, you want to have a partner who is spontaneous too. You don't want a partner who's going to go, no, but I haven't planned this, and I've got things that need to be done this weekend, and there's laundry, and what about the dogs? And, so if you've got 2 individuals who run high in dopamine, they're probably going to be a more compatible match because they're both going to be spontaneous, adventurous, and love novelty. And likewise, for people who are high in serotonin, both will be compatible with each other because they like the predictability and the certainty of what is going to happen, right? Then when it comes to testosterone and estrogen, and bearing in mind that we secrete all of these hormones. So you can have someone who's high in dopamine, low in testosterone, or high in estrogen. You can have someone who's high in serotonin, low in estrogen. So there's no correlation between the two. These are individual neurotransmitters that can be secreted in different quantities in the individuals. What is important to remember is that you're either higher in dopamine or you're higher in serotonin. You do get individuals who have a healthy balance between, or not healthy, but do have a more balanced secretion of dopamine and serotonin. So they will have moments when they're more spontaneous, moments when they like the certainty and predictability. And these can change as we grow in age. So you might find that as younger individuals, we're higher in dopamine. And if you think of university students, they'll be very quick to go, hey, let's go down to Durban for the weekend, or let's go to Cape Town for the weekend, let's go kayaking this weekend, whatever it is. And they can be more spontaneous, adventurous, and in search of novelty. But as we get older and we've had our children, we might then become higher in serotonin secretion, where we're looking for that predictability, we're looking for that certainty, we may be a little bit more, let's say, relaxed about life, or wanting more predictability in our life. So that's important to bear in mind. So when it comes to compatibility with dopamine and serotonin, like enjoys like. When it comes to people who are running high in testosterone, those individuals would prefer someone who is higher in estrogen. All right. So someone who is higher in testosterone, we call that and it's not my phrase, the director hormone. So that's kind of not the bossy guy, but it's the one who's determined, driven, ambitious, quite structured and ordered, wants to make the decisions. That's the kind of person that is higher in testosterone. Somebody who's higher in estrogen is quite happy to kind of go with the flow, have someone else make the decisions. And so you find that there, the opposites tend to attract more and are better for each other. All right. So, I mean, there's no coincidence that in most males, they run higher in testosterone and most females run higher in estrogen. That makes a more compatible match. But that's not always the case, and it can cross genders. So not all males run high in testosterone and lower in estrogen. You do get women who run higher in testosterone and lower in estrogen. And you get males who run higher in estrogen and lower in testosterone. And something that's important to remember here is that testosterone alone is not responsible for sex drive, as has been thought before. The balance, the neurochemical balance between testosterone and estrogen is what provides a healthy libido. So that's what's important to know about these particular neurotransmitters. So sorry, I lost my place there for a second. Do you have any questions around that, Tulsi? So I'm sure you might have something to say or ask around that.
Yeah, I mean, like now it explains why love is so blind when when you're like the whole chemistry starts, and you call it the chemistry of all these hormones.
Right, chemistry.
Releasing, and then the couple are trying to find the balance between all this, and then they get so blind. It's a lot of
right, and I mean a lot of that. A lot of that chemistry in the beginning is around desire. And just desire on its own is not enough to sustain a successful relationship. That's just about attractiveness. And attractiveness has many things, and we don't have enough time on this podcast to go into that. But, in the beginning, you've got desire. And then once you start to form a love bond, love relationship, that's when you start to look at compatibility. So that starts to play out. But what tends to happen in the beginning is that people recognize these things in each other, and they become drawn to those qualities.
Yeah, when you were talking about this initially, right? And I said to a couple I met, no, actually two girls I met last week, and a guy, we were having this conversation, and I was saying that this gentleman is coming to give this talk about this topic, and the two girls were like, what, we all need to learn about this. And then the guy was like, I was like, yeah, you need to have it clear from the beginning, like the relationship and the dynamics. Like, what, on date one? I'm like, no, obviously not on date one.
No, the order of, I mean, this is the interesting thing. So what seems to be the order of romantic matches is that there's first desire, then there's love, and then there's healthy attachment. And it tends to run in that order.
Yeah.
So the desirability is the attractiveness, the love is then mutual emotional investment, and healthy attachment is then what we call interdependence. So you start relying on each other and start forming a team, a compatible team that are navigating and moving through life together.
Wow, you just said something very key here, because most people, like if I'm going back to like the South African lifestyle, right? There was a lot of like like my dad's time and mom's time, they lived as a codependent family. Then there was like arranged marriage. They decided, or there was a short courting process for some people, where they went straight into the this, let's say, codependent without being independent. If you know what I
Right.
mean.
Yes.
And I think that you have to be, you go with a family, you grow up with a family, you learn your family dynamics, and a healthy family teaches you how to handle your life. Then you go independent, then you go
Yes.
interdependent. You miss the independence part, and that's where, like, I think a lot of people go wrong.
Right. And then you can have codependence, which is not ideal, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Straight
All
from
right.
like not being independent, they go straight into that without understanding the healing of being independent and having
Correct.
each one's own thing. And it's okay if you don't have this one combination together, but most things are aligned. That part gets lost, and boom, you're like already in a codependent and you don't even know what's interdependence. And I think we got a
Well,
generation, a big generation
yeah.
of people living like that at the moment.
Yeah. I think if you haven't had an opportunity to formulate your own identity, and you know what it is that you're doing in life, if you haven't had the opportunity to do that, you're going to become dependent on someone else and assume their identity and what they assume for you in the relationship. And then when you do discover your own identity, that can then lead to incompatibility, and it might even lead to resentment in the relationship because now the other person is controlling your life and creating your identity for you.
Yeah, yeah. This
Yeah.
is short piece that a lot of people don't know about, and you mentioned interdependence. So I think the next thing to go into is, how do you know the relationship is doomed?
Okay, so how do we know it's over? And that brings me to the next part of this, which is there were researchers called, they're a husband and wife team called Gottman, the Gottman couple. They're scientists, and they did research on when is a relationship, how do we know that a relationship is over? And they could predict with 94% accuracy when there was going to be a divorce or breakup in a relationship. And they came down with what they called, not my terminology, what they called the four horsemen of the apocalypse with relationships. That is a term that is used in biblical times for for Revelation, so the end of days, the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And their categorization of the four horsemen of apocalypse, you can look it up. It is on the web. It's all there. But those four categories are contempt. I'm going to go through each one and what they are, or what that means in a relationship. But it is contempt, stonewalling, defensiveness, and criticism. All right. Now, I'm going to start with contempt because they consider contempt to be the sulfuric acid of a relationship. Okay, so it is the one that will cause the relationship to become destroyed. Contempt is when there is actual dislike for one another, or one party dislikes the other one. All right, so I wouldn't go so far as to say a hatred, but there's an actual dislike for that partner. Things like eye rolling are indicative of that. So you see the couple talking, and the one who's talking, their partner is rolling their eyes at them, and there's almost this resentment, contempt happening, and that is a very strong indicator and predictor of that relationship not working out. So if there is contempt in the relationship, it's pretty dangerous. Another marker of, or how to detect whether there's contempt, is if one partner is excited about something, the other person might become angry or frustrated. So they're almost opposite each other in terms of emotional reciprocity, and they feel opposite emotions at given times, right? And so contempt is a super dangerous emotion to have in a relationship. It's very indicative of, or predictive of, the end of that relationship. Then stonewalling. Stonewalling does happen in healthy relationships. It's not great. It's something that should be unlearned. And what happens with stonewalling is there is a lack of empathy. The person shuts down and they lock you out, right? So that is kind of silent treatment, not talking about the problem, sweeping it under the rug, pretending everything's okay. That's kind of stonewalling, and that's not wanting to hear what's wrong or solve the problem. And that is also as a result of, all of these actually are as a result of lack of empathy in the relationship. And so stonewalling is an indicator of potential end to the relationship, or predictor of that. The next one is defensiveness. All right. So Again, defensiveness does happen in healthy relationships. And I would say, particularly if someone is caught off guard and accused of something, they'll become defensive to protect themselves. So it is part of a normal, healthy relationship. But when it's there all the time, when someone can do no wrong, if ever a problem gets brought up, the person becomes defensive. They might even gaslight, change it over to it's because of the other person that this thing is happening. That defensiveness is also a predictor of the relationship not working out, because it doesn't lead to solving the problems in the relationship. All right. And then the last one, which also does happen in healthy relationships, is criticism. Although criticism is not ideal, it does happen where we might point something out to our partner that we don't like. In terms of an unhealthy relationship or unhealthy setup, the criticism is almost designed to cause harm to the partner. So you're always picking, it's that person is always picking, you can't do this right, you can't do that right. And it's continuous, and it's almost denigrating to the other individual. All right. And so that is also a predictor of the relationship not working out. So those 4 things are things to look out for. Contempt being the worst. The other 3 are tolerable to certain degrees, but should be addressed. But if you've got all 4 of those, you're in serious trouble.
Wow. Yeah. I can see, like, it makes sense when you hear people talk about the breakups, and, like how it got there. And we all can talk about that, at some point in our life. And so, yeah, there's some, there's another question that comes up about that, the part about during the relationship. I don't know if you have anything that you wanted to add before I go and maybe take it into another direction.
You can go ahead, and I think I've said what I can about that. So you can go ahead and say what you want to say about during.
Recently, I've learned something about healthy anger. And that's really interesting, because we always thought, like, we first were taught that you angry, that's not acceptable. Then we were taught, like, you got anger issues. Like, as the doctors and psychologists and these people who brought up these theories came along, we also decided to adopt it in the wrong sense, right? And now recently there's something that I'm hearing called healthy anger, and people show it as this natural, it's a natural cycle in all animals, not only the humans, because you'll find that elephants that gave birth to their young ones, or you find any mother protecting their baby, and would get angry at whatever the threat is, and would react some way. And I think that we confuse this when you're in a relationship, because I think a lot of people don't know how to use the words properly. Like, you were saying, right, an example about instead of saying you grumpy, say it like in a positive way. And I think that when you've got that someone's been hurt in a slight way because you didn't use the words correctly, the anger can be distorted. And I think that I think we have to relearn when you're in a partnership, that as you're building this relationship and you using the correct words and you're teaching each other in a way, the anger, how is that healthy anger to come across? Because you can get sick if you keep it in, like, right. And then like you say, you reach doomsday.
Okay. All right. So very, very good question, and very interesting one. And it brings around the topic of healthy communication. But again, that would be an entirely separate podcast. But let me talk about anger and what healthy anger and healthy expression of anger looks like. What's important to understand is that anger is a defensive emotion. So it's an emotion of protection. All right. So if somebody gets angry, they're defending or protecting something. That's why animals who have young ones become angry and aggressive, right? Because they're protecting what is most dear to them, which is their lineage, is the continuation of the species. And so they become protective, defensive, and that is where the anger comes through. And it's the same in human beings. When we become angry, we're defending or protecting something, whether it's our children. If someone comes and wants to do something to your kids, I mean, you're going to lose it and you're going to get angry. But again, if somebody attacks you as a person, emotionally, verbally, psychologically, you're going to become angry because you're defending yourself. Okay. And so anger is an emotion of defense. And so if you do feel yourself getting angry, a good question to ask yourself is, what am I defending? And that'll usually lead you to a healthy conversation or communication around, I'm feeling attacked. I feel attacked because you said this, which is really kind of, it's knocking my character. It's denigrating. It's insulting me. And so I'm feeling attacked, and that's why I became angry, right? Which then leads to healthier communication, so that when you're communicating, you're not attacking your partner, you're not insulting them, and you're having a conversation with them about where the problem is without accusing them of something that is going to make them defensive. And I've always said, if you're working through a problem, if your partner becomes defensive, stop the argument right there, because as soon as they become defensive, you're getting nowhere. All right. If someone gets angry and defensive, that argument is not, there's no solution that's going to come from that. It has to be a healthy discussion. There can be disagreement, there can be heightened emotion, but if someone becomes defensive or angry, that's when it should stop, and pick it up when everybody's calmed down. Does that answer your question, Tulsi?
Yeah, that's a good answer. And that's emotional intelligence, like for someone to stop and that's a healthy relationship when both people stop. This is the point where we need to stop, and so
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about, healthy conflict, which again would be a discussion for another podcast. But, healthy conflict is not something that children should be protected from, because if children don't witness healthy conflict, they never learn how to handle conflict. If they're protected from it and all the conflict happens in the bedroom behind closed doors, children are never going to be able to see how problems get resolved. And so they're not going to be educated around that. And there is a way to handle healthy conflict in a relationship as well, so that you don't end up being in a fight for 10 days over something that could have been resolved in an hour.
Yeah, and for the Indian community, I'm sure you will find this part valuable, because as you know about our history, we tend to be submissive, or we tend to be passive, and that sometimes leads to people pleasing, and you don't actually then you can't learn conflict. Your children can't learn conflict.
Right.
So I think that this is becoming more open, like be authentic to your words or yourself and your energy, so that you can walk authentically through life. I think that's
absolutely
what people are starting to understand.
Yeah, authenticity is key. And so a lot of people think authenticity means act the way you feel. It doesn't necessarily mean that. It means know how you feel and be able to communicate how you feel in a healthy way. So if you're feeling, look, here's something interesting we can maybe close the podcast off on, right? So something very interesting is, and it's helpful to know that with children will always try to make their parents feel the way that they feel. So if a child is frustrated, they're going to try and make their parents feel frustrated. If they're angry, they're going to try and make their parents angry. If they're sad, they're going to try and make their parents sad. And you see it in relationships as well, right? In relationships, if you're feeling neglected, you're going to try and make your partner feel neglected. If you're angry, you're going to try and make your partner angry, right? And it's just so that we can connect on an emotional level and feel the same feelings. And there's a healthy way to bring that about, where you don't actually have to trigger each other. You don't have to bring each other to a point of heightened negative emotion. You can use that principle to bring each other into a positive emotion and work together to solve problems in relationships. So, but yes, again, it's a conflict resolution and communication is an entirely different podcast.
Awesome. So that's
great.
Us for today, guys, and I'm going to see you on the next, and I'm going to leave Andy to say bye, and if he wants to say any last words as well. So from me, bye. Over to you, Andy.
Tulsi, thank you very much. I really appreciate you having me here. I hope that we've managed to give something valuable to people to work with in their relationships, to improve their relationships, have healthier relationships. And I would say my closing words would be, remember this: it is easier to fix a relationship than it is to start a new one. The problems you don't fix in this relationship, you will have to fix in the next one. So work at it until you absolutely know that there is no way to solve the relationship problems that you have, and get to that point where you leave. But don't leave too soon, because whatever you don't solve in one relationship, you will address again in the next one. Thank you, Tulsi.
Amazing words, Andy. Oh my God, it's a pleasure having you, and I learned so much. So bye, guys, for now, and I'll see you on the next.
Bye, everyone.